Hello and welcome to a special Monster Closet edition of Movie Time Machine, your retro pop culture and movie review podcast where we take movies from the past and relive them in the present. And I am your horror host emeritus, Jamie. And that's right, it's a solo show today. It's just you, me, and a couple of films by the same name. I like to call them Black Christmas. It's that time of the year right now. At the day of recording, it's the 22nd of December, so we're 3 days away from when the big guy gets here. And what I wanted to do today was to explore two horror movie classics. Yes, I'm referring to the 2006 remake as a classic. And what kind of was my impetus for recording this? I got COVID the day of Thanksgiving, so not wanting to share my gift of disease with my family, I opted to stay home and decided to get into the holiday spirit a little early. So I started by revisiting the 1974 Bob Clark classic called Black Christmas. And I'd seen it once before, probably around high school. And I remember honestly not having a highly favorable opinion of the movie. It was certainly dark. It was certainly disturbing. And, I recognized a few of the actresses. Margot Kidder is in here of Superman fame, and we get Olivia Hussey, who plays the lead character, Jess Bradford, known probably best as her role as Juliet in, I think it's the 1967 version of Romeo and Juliet. It was in the 60s. It's the one that you probably saw played for you in your English class if you're age 30 or up, right? The Leo Claire Danes one was a little too risque and a little too out of the pocket from our guy Baz Luhrmann. So I think more often than not they played the classic one. But nevertheless, great actress, and she is here as our leading lady. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's jump right in. And full spoilers ahead. I do want to give that note here. There's really not too much to spoil as far as, there's no Sixth Sense moment here. Nothing like that, but just want to be mindful of that in case you haven't seen these movies. And all right, let's get into it. So Black Christmas, 1974. Jess Bradford and her sorority sisters are celebrating one last Christmas party before everyone goes their separate ways for the holiday. The house phone rings, and Jess is horrified to discover that she has yet another phone call from an unidentified person who repeatedly calls the house and who the sorority girls have dubbed the Moaner. He's making lewd comments, lewd remarks, and just general unpleasantries. And this is actually one of the cooler things that we noticed right away from the film is there was some audio trickery at hand here. So there's a couple sounds and voices that get overdubbed when the Moaner calls the house. And as a viewer, we're, given access to what she's hearing as well. And it's pretty disturbing, mostly because it is so unnatural, that one person can't be saying all those things or making all those sounds at the same time. And it's very effective. So right out of the gate, we get our first kill. So Jess is on the phone. All of the sisters know who it is because he's been calling the house. And one of her sisters, Claire, is visibly upset. And she's being teased by Margot Kidder's character, who I believe is named Barb. So anyway, Claire retires to her room to pack to go meet her boyfriend for the Christmas holiday. But little does she know, we know, because the camera switches to the POV of the killer. And I'll say right away that I'm having a hard time remembering a film before this where this was such a focal point. I'm sure they'd used it before. I mean, notably Peeping Tom, I think, is often referenced as pioneering this killer point of view, but it was certainly not used to the exhaustion that it is today. So we see the killer climbing up into the house from the outside and goes in through the attic, and he's hiding in Claire's closet. And sure enough, he grabs her and suffocates her with a, one of those dry cleaning plastic bags that they reserve for your nice clothes. And I only bring that up with such specificity because that's the famous shot of the movie. He leaves Claire's body in the attic with the candle on, and you can see her face behind the bag. It's on some of the posters, maybe the movie cover, and it's pretty iconic. So Claire has been dispatched, and we continue to follow um, the reactions from the rest of her sisters, and no one sees her leave, so it's not really nobody knows that she's been killed. And her father comes to pick her up the next day, and she doesn't meet her father to go home. And this kind of is the opening action to uh, the mystery that's going on. I would call this the B plot, what's going on with Claire. The A plot is there's the stalker who's calling the house and freaking out the sorority sisters and picking them off one by one. The B plot is Claire's father, who's slowly figuring out that something has happened to her and trying to get people involved to find her. And one of those people is is she my favorite character? It's pretty good. It's Mrs. Mack, the house mother. And she is iconic in this film because, she's portrayed as this comedic role. And I will say, for as scary as this movie is, it really does leave plenty of room for levity, and it doesn't feel forced. And Mrs. Mack is our main culprit here for comedy, which I do appreciate. She's the running gag is that she has a bunch of bottles of alcohol stashed in various places throughout the house, under the toilet lid and wherever else she might feel necessary to stash a little bit of enlightenment, as it were. And this character, I guess, upon further reading, was based off of Bob Clark's aunt. So he kind of threw that in as a fun nod to her. And we're all the better for it as the audience. So we have our side characters looking for Claire, and now we're following Jess. And we see her visit her boyfriend, Peter, who is some sort of performance major, concert pianist. He's training, and she has some news for Peter. He is all in with his relationship with Jess. He wants to marry her, and Jess found out that she is pregnant, and shocker, she does not want to keep the kid. So this is a little bit of the inversion of the dynamic we see, in movies and TV, where maybe the guy is not too keen on keeping the kid, but the mom to be is pretty intent on, bringing this life into the world. And I will say that as a high schooler watching this movie, this completely went over my head. And now I bring it up now because I think that we're starting to see why this film is so iconic. So this was released in 1974. And for all you history buffs out there, or those who might not know, that's 2 years after the Roe v. Wade decision in the United States. So certainly we're getting some sort of political examination here from Bob Clark. And he claims that this is not a political film, but we as horror fans all know that anything, tangentially political or even mocking a big event of the day is definitely trying to make a statement of it. I think of George A. Romero casting Dwayne Jones as the role, in the lead role for Night of the Living Dead. He plays Ben, and he's an African-American actor. And this was right around the tail end of the civil rights movement. So that did not go unnoticed in Hollywood. And same thing, Romero always claimed that Dwayne Jones was the best actor for the role. No argument here. He's phenomenal in that movie. But also, it seemed pretty clear that Romero was probably trying to give roles to people who deserved them and didn't necessarily get them in every role that they auditioned for. So we have Jess, and she's entering conflict with Peter because he wants to keep the kid and wants to continue a relationship with her. She wants an abortion, and she wants to continue staying in school, graduating, and she has big plans for her career. So we already have some tension established with Peter, and the film kind of leads us to believe that maybe he has something to do with the killings. But we also, and I need to go back and watch this more closely, because the way it concludes, I guess you could say it's open-ended, but I think it's pretty clear that Peter is not the killer. And that's part of what makes this movie so haunting, is we get a final scene, a final confrontation. Most of the characters have been dispatched, and it's Jess realizing that the calls are coming through the house, as they are wont to do in horror films. And she's being pursued by the killer. At the same time, Lieutenant Ken Fuller, played to perfection by John Saxon, we'll see him again, and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And he is trying to get to the house to save Jess because he's working with a phone company. He knows what's going on about right when Jess figures it out too. So he's trying to get there, and then Peter, who has been kind of hanging out outside of the house to keep tabs on Jess, sees that something's wrong, goes inside, and Jess, of course, thinks that he might be the killer and ends up dispatching him in the basement of the house. So we got layers going on here. We got layers going on. Anytime that you go from attic, main level, basement, we're talking about different layers and stages of psychological understanding. And I'm not going to dive headfirst into that pool, but you can take my meaning and, unpack that for yourself if you so choose with this film. So yeah, that's really a short summation of the film. Jess ultimately dispatches of Peter. They give the all clear from the police that the killer has been stopped and saved the day. And then they leave Jess in the room, and it ends kind of ambiguously because we as the viewer know that Peter was not necessarily the killer, and the killer is still inside the house. And the final shot, I believe, is Jess in the bed as the camera slowly pans away. So her fate remains ambiguous, which I think the film is all the better for that. Yeah, this film is very well paced. It never felt slow. It's well acted. Everyone's giving an earnest performance, not a cliched over the top horror movie performance. It's well shot, well directed, well lit. It had to have been fairly low budget. I had the numbers some point. It only earned 1.3 million Canadian because this was a Canadian film that slowly made its way to the US and gained credibility, or I'm sorry, cult credibility in the subsequent years. And it kind of had a slower half-life in the United States because the other thing going on when this film was released was Ted Bundy. And I think he had just been arrested, like not a day or two before this film was set to premiere on TV. So they, put the kibosh on showing it on syndicated TV, and we had to wait a little bit longer to see it. But the legacy of this film, along with everything I've already listed, and you can get most of this off of Wikipedia, just like I did. But I'm here so you don't have to read, and that's my gift to you this Christmas season. So it's one of the earliest slasher films, particularly with the killer POV, directly inspired John Carpenter's Halloween, and he says as much in interviews. And we get another handful of tropes here. I mean, Jess is one of the first final girls, quote unquote, as we see it. She recognizes the horror, engages with it, survives it. And we also see sex as a prognosticator of doom, made famous by Randy's speech in Scream, notably Margot Kidder, an overtly sexual sorority sister who is very fond of drinking as well. She's given the most cinematic death in the film, and she is impaled in her bed by a glass unicorn. And anyone who's not a horror fan is going to think I'm crazy when I say that it is one of the most beautiful scenes and shots of the movie. It's very dark. The lighting is expertly placed, and there's just all of this red coming at you from the screen. It's beautiful. I don't have a better word for it, and I know that might sound twisted to someone who's not a horror fan, but if you know, you know. So I would say that this film is absolutely a bona fide classic. I certainly came around after this viewing, and I would give this 4 out of 5 stars. I would say rush right out, watch it immediately. It's not a feel-good film, mind you. This is not Elf. This is not Home Alone. This is not even Christmas Vacation. So this is a bit of a darker tone, but it's a damn good movie. And it's really suspenseful and really scary. And I promise you're going to be looking over your shoulder once or twice after watching this movie. So after that, I immediately jumped into Black Christmas 2006. Now, this is a really interesting case because this kind of falls in what I call the horror remake era, and this cycles up nicely when I was in high school. They were rebooting all of the classics: Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, When a Stranger Calls, The Hills Have Eyes, The Omen, And several of these even came out in the same year as Black Christmas. And that is The Omen, The Wicker Man, When a Stranger Calls, The Hills Have Eyes, and Black Christmas. So I think unfairly it got bunched up in the collective conscious with those other films. And I'm here to say that this movie is a ton of fun and definitely is not worthy of some of the flack that it caught along the way. But I will also say that unlike the original, this is not a certified classic. This is schlocky, like 1980s B movie fun. That's what this movie is, just fun. It's gory, it's gross, it's over the top, it's kind of stupid, but any true horror fan will have fun with this movie, I promise. So rather than doing a interpretation of the events of the previous film, kind of like we get in Nightmare on Elm Street remake and The Omen, this kind of goes a different direction. We follow the killer and the story of Billy Lentz, who grew up in the house where the sorority sisters live now, and who begins picking them off one by one when they're all snowed in over Christmas. And we get his backstory with some pretty gnarly flashbacks, and those really, as far as I can tell, are the only time we leave the house. Unlike the first film. The first film, there's the subplot with Claire. They're out and about in the community and the college. And I really like that about this movie, is that it contains the horror to the house. They're snowed in, the phone's not working, they're stuck in there with Billy, and they just have to survive. And I will say this film is a hard R. I mean, the first one is definitely upsetting, disturbing, rated R, but this is over the top, gory, hard R. I'm talking Billy Lentz is, dispatching his mother and using her skin to make Christmas cookies. It's disgusting. I could barely watch that scene, but this is a hard R, so viewers beware. But I think that's what makes it so fun, is that it is so over the top. It reaches that special moment where it circles back and it's like, okay, this is ridiculous. I can have fun because this is so ridiculous out of left field. There's no way that this could actually happen. And that is why I enjoy it. It's zany, it's wacky, it's over the top, and it's just a ton of fun. And I will say, if you're a viewer around my age, grew up as a teenager in the early 2000s, there's a murderer's row of soon-to-be famous actresses. So we get Michelle Trachtenberg, Harriet the Spy. She was on Gossip Girl. You know her. We get Mary Elizabeth Winstead in one of her earliest roles. She's butchering a Southern accent, but we don't care because she's still great. We get Lacey Chabert from Mean Girls fame, and Andrea Martin, who is a fun little Easter egg here. She played Phil in the original Black Christmas, so she's playing the house mother here, Mrs. Mack, and she's incredible. So A+ cast, A+ performances, and what I really like about these performances is kind of post-Scream you could see, and even there's a handful of modern horror films where they have to be ironic or self-aware that they're in a horror movie, like nudging the audience, wink, wink. This movie has none of that. These characters are just trying to survive the horror that's going on around them, and I think it's way better for that. I think this movie is not as fun if they're fully aware of the joke and they're in on it. They're not in on the joke, and that's what makes it so great. So where the previous movie failed commercially, this one succeeded slightly more. It doubled its budget and then a little extra change, but the reviews would not have you believe that. This movie has a brutal 14% rotten score from critics and 38% from the audience, which is, to me, is low. Horror fans tend to rally around even the bad movies if they're fun, and I think part of their hang up here is that the original is so iconic, and I think that maybe rubbed a handful of viewers the wrong way. But I'm here to say that I don't think this movie was trying to be anything like the original. I think it took the big ideas, the sorority house, the killer inside, and did its own zany thing, and I am absolutely here for it. I thought it was so much fun, and I kind of nodded at this before, but to me, this is I hear Gen X horror fans talk about their favorites that are not necessarily classics. They're My Bloody Valentine, Motel Hell, Pumpkinhead, the B-roll movies that they love just checking out over and over and over again from Blockbuster, their favorite video rental store, knowing that, they're kind of selecting horror junk food, but they love it because it's so much fun. That's exactly what this movie is to me. I'm the perfect mark for this movie. It came out at just the right time, and I absolutely love it. I've watched it 2 years in a row now, and I'll probably watch it again next year. So I highly recommend, but also viewer beware. You kind of have to be a hardcore horror fan, bit of a gore hound, and I just think you'll have a ton of fun with this one. This is 3 out of 5 stars. It can't match the legacy of the original, but it's also not trying to, and I give it some points for that as well. So that is all I have for you today. Short and sweet. I just wanted to give you a nice little Christmas gift if you're looking for something to watch outside of the warm, saccharine, cheerful favorites. I love those movies too. Do not get me wrong. But sometimes it's nice to have a different tone, a change of pace. You watch one of these and then it makes the elves that much sweeter. It makes Home Alone that much more heartwarming when Kevin McAllister gives Catherine O'Hara a big hug at the end of the movie. So thank you for joining me for this special Black Christmas Monster Closet episode of Movie Time Machine, your retro pop culture movie review podcast where we take movies from the past and relive them in the present. If you have any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, challenges, reach out. I don't know where we're at, but if you're a fan, you can find us. We're out there. And until then, I will see you next time. Merry Christmas.